I have spent so much time on social media over the last few days, trolling through Christians' comments, Muslims' comments, people who believe in spirituality. And I get the same thing every time. This is true. And on every occasion when I've challenged them about why it's true, I don't get anything back. I get nothing of substance back. Now, I'm appealing to you guys out there, you Christians, you Muslims, you Buddhists, you people who believe in these spiritual concepts. If you want me to be convinced that this is true, if you think my eternal soul depends on this being true and my accepting it, just telling me it's true is the least likely thing you can do to convince me. Please, I implore you, give us a call. Let's have the conversation. If you think I need to know it's true, call the show and convince me it's true. Your opportunity is now, because the show is starting right now. Hello. Today is March the 1st, 2026. It is the 10th year of Talk Heathen, and it's my first show of the 10th year of Talk Heathen, so I'm exceptionally excited. My name is Richard Gilliver, and I am joined by someone I am so excited to have on the show, Trust But Verify. Trust But Verify, how are you, sir?
I'm doing fantastic, Richard, and I've been watching you for so long, so I'm fangirling a little bit right now, so I'm honored to be here, so thank you very much.
Absolutely. Cannot wait. I hope we get some great calls for you. Welcome to everyone on TikTok seeing us in the vertical stream, and welcome to everyone on YouTube. We're live on both platforms and ready to engage with us, so give us a call. Talk Heathen is a live call-in show, and we have open lines, so get your calls in at 512-991-9242 or from your computer at tiny.cc/callth. We are live every Sunday at 1 p.m. Central on YouTube and TikTok. But remember, if you can't make it for whatever reason, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. And we can... Also, you can tell I've not done this for a while, can't you? Because I've lost my place. So I'm going to skip that. Talk Heathen, I'm supposed to be a professional, y'all. Talk Heathen is a product of the atheist community of Austin, a 501c3 non-profit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. And we do not do this alone. We have a fantastic crew behind us, so I want to go to the crew cam. Let's bring those beautiful people up, the video and audio people, moderators, timestamp takers, call screeners, everybody else. Look at that lovely bunch of people there. Would you like to be one of those attractive crew members? Say attractive crew members. So I use the term very loosely. Would you like to be one of those crew members? You can be. You can be a guest on one of our shows or eventually even become a host. We're always looking for people interested in being part of our productions. So email volunteer@atheist-community.org to get involved. We do have a call waiting in the wings, but before we do that, I'm just going to go back to Trust But Verify and say hello, welcome. It's great to have you here. And where can people find you? What do you usually do? And what kind of content do you make?
Okay, well, you can find me on YouTube and TikTok under Trust But Verify 2024. And I do live streams 4 to 5 days a week. And I focus specifically on, what is your God belief? And so I talk to mostly theists, but I'll have an occasional deist or pantheist in my live, and really it's just about, I take the position I'm a non-resistant non-believer, and I'm just looking for evidence that would convince me that this God is real. So that's mainly what I do. I've been doing it for about 1.5 years, and I really love doing it. So, but I'm just excited to be here. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to this one. Like I said, we have got a call in the queue. Please, theists, do call in. Theists do get priority on the show. And TikTok people, this is the first show I've done since we've dual streamed. So I want to give a special shout out to you people watching on TikTok, because I know there are theists watching this right now on our TikTok live stream who are dying to talk to us. And you might be a little bit put off by the fact that you've got to call into the show. You don't just join TikTok like you would normally for a chat. Don't be put off by it. It's the same great conversations you'd have on TikTok. It's just in a slightly different format. You can call 1-912 and I forgot the phone number. I'm really crap at this today. I told you it's a long time since I've done this. 1512-991-9242, or use your computer at tiny.cc/call-th. I believe it or not, I know that number off by heart. I'm just so giddy. I'm just so giddy today because it's my first show back. So TikTok people, please give us a call. Whether you've never met an atheist before and you just want to have a conversation and find out what it is that we think about stuff, or whether you have a hardcore philosophical argument for God, please do give us a call, because we are waiting to take your call. And speaking of calls, we have I believe it's Jahdel on the line from Canada, and wants to share an explanation for rumors surrounding and about Christ. Jahdel, am I pronouncing that correctly, first of all?
Yeah, it's Jahdel. Yeah.
Jahdel, perfect. Thank you very much. Right, hit us with it. What is it you want to talk about?
Well, the question I've been asking myself for a long time is, who is Jesus if God doesn't exist? And how is he able to make such an impact?
Yeah, fair question. Fair question. So you have thoughts on this, I presume, Jahdel?
I've been thinking about it for quite a while, and I've come up with a pretty good timeline explaining everything.
Okay, go on. Hit us with it then, and then we'll give you our thoughts afterwards.
Okay, so the divine conception was essentially Mary having twins. So what happened is Mary had an affair that led to her conception and pregnancy. She was engaged to Joseph, but she wasn't married. To avoid public shame and punishment, Mary claimed the Immaculate Conception. Then they traveled to Bethlehem before giving birth, far away from Nazareth, so they could remain secret. And the baby was intended to be Simon Iscariot's firstborn son to continue his family legacy. I think that's who the real father of Jesus Christ was Simon Iscariot's father. It's a very blasphemous thing to say, but I can't think of a rational explanation otherwise. And you could say it's any of the disciples, but I like it being Judas because there's reason and why behind it. I can go into that later on if you want. But essentially, Simon's from Kerioth, which is close enough to Bethlehem to arrive within one day, and it's far enough away to avoid suspicion that he's doing anything. So they had a messenger wait nearby when Mary begins labor, and then the messenger summons Simon to receive the firstborn, and they're going to discuss how they're going to handle the custody, secrecy, and public perception. Of course, Mary wants to keep the baby, and Joseph understands the consequences that'll happen if she's discovered having an affair or premarital sex before marriage. So he doesn't want the baby, and Simon wants his firstborn son. So once Simon arrives and they find out that it's twins, they have a huge problem kind of on their hands. And I think what happened was Mary wanted to keep the secondborn as her own because it's like a miracle, and then Simon would be able to keep Judas as his legacy. And there's hardly any information about Simon or Judas in the Bible at all. So all my arguments are based off the Bible because there's no evidence for me to base anything else off of other than why and how. So does that kind of make sense how the conception started? That's kind of my first section.
Trust but verify. Take it away. I'll let you respond to that first.
You know, I think the thing I was kind of going through my head is because I do hear different what ifs.
That's all we can do is what if, right?
Yeah, it's what ifs. So I think the big question we can put down is how, because you did say, well, I'm only just basing this off the Bible. So what makes this more true than any other explanation? For example, if we just say, what makes this more true than it's all fiction and none of it happened?
That could be a story. It could be theater. It could be like a theater that they did in the streets for people. That's kind of what I think happened. Yeah, it could be theater. It could be fake. But it could also be like, this is the only way that they could survive the situation.
Okay.
Especially
and then how do we...
If Mary cheated, that's a huge deal. So she has to say, oh, I'm having a baby. Oh, it's a gas. It's nothing. She's making up lies to cover up for herself. And then she leaves town before she gives birth.
And then, well, again, like, how do we know, like, how could we determine that this happened versus this never happened?
It's a big what if, right? But how do you explain, like, I go on later to explain how Judas kind of did the, there's like I can't remember the story, but it's like two brothers that look the same. One of them's hairy, one of them's not. And then one brother adds the hair onto him to make him look like it, and they trick his father because his father's blind. So kind of what I'm doing, taking that same idea, taking Jesus and Judas. Judas is hairy. Jesus says, Judas is betraying me. And then Judas leaves. He shaves his beard. He wears some of Jesus' clothes. Jesus leaves to go to Judas's house. Stays there hidden for a few days. Well, Judas kills himself, so to speak, but it's actually Judas going on the cross, taking the blame for Jesus because they're identical twins, and nobody knows, because if it's found out, then those consequences are Mary gets stoned to death. So there's like a good reason to keep it secret, and it's between just a few people, which would be basically the parents and Jesus and Judas. And I don't even know if they would even tell the kids, to be honest with you. So it might just be between all the parents, and then just say, oh, Jesus, you were born of a virgin. And then he gets a God complex, starts studying and studying and studying. Because I understand what that can do. You study and you study and you study, and then you can go when you're 12 years old, he goes to the Jewish priest, and he teaches them everything he's learned about what's to come of him. And then once the priests hear that, they're like, well, this dude says he's born of a virgin. That doesn't make fucking sense. Let's go, let's get him. Let's go get Mary. She was cheating something. She was doing something wrong. So let's go stone her to death. And then that's... Sorry,
sorry for interrupting you. What do you think the importance of this is? This kind of alternative narrative.
Why did it happen? How did it happen? Why is it?
Yeah.
Why do people believe in miracles when something can be rationally and more scientifically true? To explain it away, because it's what better explanation do you have?
It never happened.
Yeah, that's true too. You could go with that too, which makes more sense. But look at the impact it had. That's the biggest thing. It's like, why is Christianity at 1/3 of the world population? And why did 1/3 of the angels fucking fall from heaven? Why is that the same thing?
But let's just say we've got this story, and we've got this miraculous story that millions of people around the world believe, and we've got this alternative narrative which could take several forks. But generally speaking, this alternative narrative is that there was a man or a group of men who existed, and this mythological story grew up around them, and then it's gone on to have great influence on the world. Why do we need to zone in on that mythological thing if we don't have evidence?
Sorry, say that again. Say it again, sir.
If we don't have any specific evidence following any one of these forks of this mythological narrative, what utility is there in zoning in on one particular fork of speculation and saying, right, I think this, and I think this, and I think this, and I think this, when we could just say, look, we don't have any evidence, but it's still more probable than magic Jesus. Why do we need to speculate about
for the sake of argument, man? For the sake of an argument. Like, we could just be like, no, it's all not true, and just go along our days, but that's not going to explain. If let's just say he is real, let's say there is no God, I can come up with an explanation that explains it.
It doesn't explain it.
With me all you want to go off about absolutely nothing. I get it. We're not really basing it on anything. But nonetheless, there's rumors, and I can explain each and every single one of those rumors using rationality and reason.
If you've not got any evidence to support that,
well, they burned all the evidence, dude, a long time ago. They went and they burned it all.
So that doesn't mean you have evidence for that claim. Yeah, that again is speculation. How do you know there've been the evidence, specific evidence for that specific
What evidence
claim?
is there then? There's the evidence that Pontius Pilate said that he crucified Jesus Christ. That's one piece of evidence. That's the only one I can think of.
But that doesn't
So what does
support
that
this
mean?
particular narrative that you're trying to throw
Well,
out
how
there.
can it be? The narrative is a secret because you don't want to get stoned to death. That's the whole point. You got to keep it undercover, otherwise you die. Because as soon as the secret comes out, people are like, well, he wasn't born of a virgin. Mary cheated on her husband with so-and-so. That's not right. Let's make it right by, bringing God's law in place, which would be stoning her to death outside of town. So there's reasons behind it. That's the whole point, is there's a reason. And like I said, we could just go off about being nothing, or we could actually go off about what the rumors are and try to explain it through. When I tell people my timeline, they're interested because it ties things together and it makes sense of what's going on. That's the whole point.
Just hang on. I think Trust But Verify had a question for you. So if you can just let him ask his question first, and then we'll move on.
All right.
Question
Am I
two
asking a
is,
question or you?
I am, if that's okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah, let's hear it.
Okay, so I'm just, it sounds like what you've come up with, and yeah, I'll concede it's possible, but the problem is that it sounds like we can't really falsify it.
Well, that's the point.
And-
You can't falsify the Bible either. Like, I can make up a story and say it's true.
And so if
I
it's
can explain- and
unfalsifiable-
rationality. Well,
Right.
what's
But
reliable?
if it-
Who's got a reliable Bible story? Anyone?
Okay.
Didn't
Well,
think
that's
so.
just
It's
it.
not real.
Like, how do we, if
not
it's
real, man.
unfalsifiable, because
That's the
there's,
whole point.
well, see, the thing is that there's other things in other religions that are also unfalsifiable. Does that make them true?
Oh, no, of course not. No, I actually believe that the story is false. I think it was a theater, and I think maybe they did it on the streets, maybe they did it in a show, but like it became a big thing of a rebellion theater. Like, this is what happens when you call the priests a brood of vipers, and this is how you get away with it. And they took that story, and I think they twisted it into what it is now. And it's just like this illogical, magical fairy tale. Instead of the actual truth, which is Jesus was a badass going up to the priest and saying, hey, you guys are hypocrites. You don't believe in the shit that you're talking. You're just trying to get the tithes. You're trying to get the money. You're trying to get the sacrifice so you can live easy. Same thing with the beggars on the street. Some of them weren't even sick. Some of them weren't even blind. You healed them, and then, oh, Jesus healed me. Now I'm a famous healed guy. And I bet you $1 million that people would be like, if you go up to a guy who was healed by Jesus, he'd be famous. And they bet you they could think he could heal people too. And then placebo effect, like,
Okay.
that whole thing.
Now, if here's the thing, if let's just say that Jesus actually did heal people, turn water into wine, resurrected after the third day, rose to heaven, all that stuff. Appeared to his disciples.
No. Let's not say that, because that's bullshit. And you and I both know that. Let's say it's rational. Let's say he faked his death. Let's say that he magically turned water into wine, and everybody was convinced that he was this dude that could do anything and was literally the Son of God. Girls were flocking to him. He's probably getting mad goontan.
Well, if he's convincing people of all these other things, why would we need to have believe this thing about this whole backstory about Mary? Like, because it seems like it wouldn't matter at that point,
what's
right?
What's the Immaculate Conception come from? It's the Immaculate Conception. Why? What for? What reason? Why was he born in a barn in Bethlehem?
Well, because the reason why is
thing?
well, because there's been immaculate conceptions in other religions, right? And so
it's
like it's miraculous. It demonstrates divinity, stuff like that.
Yeah, I know there has been. And it's a copy of another one, which is a copy of another one. I get it. I've been down this road, man. Trust me. I'm just thinking, this is literally the question I've had. Who was Jesus if he was a real person without God? Who was he? If he was real, who was he? That's the big if. What if he was real and God's not real? Then what do you have left? Is my explanation, or an explanation you could come up with. But I've thought about it enough, I think enough times, and I've gone over this enough with enough people that there's not a lot of holes in my system, because it's based off of what you think happens in the Bible, not off of really evidence. So I can go in and out of these crevices as much as I want to creatively to make it fit so that it makes sense.
I think
yeah.
creatively is exactly where you're going there, because it does sound like a piece of creative writing you've come up with, if I'm honest. And that's
how do you
that's
think of
what
an
the
idea?
difficult
How do you
part
think
for
of
me.
something that you don't know?
Jahdel, if you could just hang on, because you keep interrupting when both myself and Trust are trying to speak to you, and it's a bit frustrating. It feels like you've come up with this narrative that you've thought about, and you've got an idea, and it's a convincing alternative explanation, and that's all well and good. And there's nothing wrong with that in and of itself so much. The problem is when you're positing it as the explanation, when there's nothing to support it. And that's where I have the difficulty with it. So is there anything that you've kind of got, any scholarship you've looked at which you might be informing this decision, or is it just something that you've come up with by thinking about it?
With anything, you think E over MC squared was not thought of creatively? Or do you think that was like, oh, I have an idea that's very, very smart? It came out of the top of his head like any idea that's good comes out.
And it was supported. I've actually read that paper. I've actually read that paper by Einstein. It's not just to chuck it in the air and hope, let's see where it lands, and hope that this is the case.
How does he think? He thinks about things. And I know when I think about stuff, ideas, the best ones anyway, come out of thin air. You have an invention, whatever, you're thinking about something, oh, maybe this will be, innovative for that. And you're constantly trying to figure and make sense of the stuff.
Yeah, I don't think that's what Richard was saying. I think what Richard is saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to speak for you, but if I'm hearing what you're saying, Richard, is that it was a thought that Einstein generated. It came to him, but then he went into the lab and tested it, right? He went and did the math on the chalkboard and it worked out. And then other people went and did the math a lot after him and it worked out. And this kind of points back to the concept of falsifiability that I was talking about earlier. And see, I'm not going to say that what you're talking about is completely useless. It actually has a pretty good applicability in terms of, I would use something like this, because you had alluded to earlier, you had said, hey, the whole Jesus doing miracles, that's all BS, right? I think you had said that earlier. I would use something like this to a Christian, and I would say, well, how do we know that the whole pregnancy was staged and that, Mary just got pregnant outside of wedlock and they needed a reason to cover it up? And I would use, what you came up with as like a possible, alternative scenario. And then I would ask a Christian, so how do you determine which one is more true? What it says in the Bible or what this alternative explanation is? I think it has, utility. So,
like, you could be worshiping a demon, you would not even know it.
Right, exactly. You're absolutely right. I'm with you on that. And so I would use, that's how I would use this.
Like, how do you know?
Yeah.
How do you know? You could be worshiping the devil and you not even know it.
Totally agree.
Right? That's kind of scary. That's kind of scary, a little bit for me anyway.
So outside of this idea of it being utility, Jahdel, let's talk about it.
What it's used for? I got it, guys. I got it. What it's used for is to make people have a rational, sound mind. Instead of being like, oh, the Bible's full of miracles. No. Jesus performed these miracles. How did he do so? He did it with trickery. He did it with magic, like they did in Egypt. And Matthew even talks about him going to Egypt, where he would learn these things. He probably learned about what Moses did, and probably about the gods there, and how it's all like a big game, man. Like, it's a big show.
But I don't think it does demonstrate a rational, sound mind if you're coming up with a hypothesis which has not been falsified, and you're just throwing a possibility out there. Unless you're using it, Jahdel, please just wait until I've finished. Unless you're using it as a form of utility, as Trust has just given an example of doing, and it does have the utility in that context, that's fine. But if you're throwing it out there as a serious hypothesis to be considered, as a serious explanation to be considered as to what actually happened, then it needs more than that. It needs that evidence to back it up. And this is the sticking point for me. if you're going to use it as more than an argument from utilities, more than let's have a look at this in situ and see which is more likely, it's perfectly relevant there. But if you're going to put that out there and say, this is what's likely happened, then you need evidence to back it up, because there are lots of ideas, including that Jesus didn't exist at all, out there. So if you're going to line this up as the most probable scenario, you need more than, I've been thinking about this and it makes sense to me. You need that evidence there. Does that make sense?
Well, yes. It does make sense exactly what you're saying. And I totally get it, because we're going off of almost nothing. But there is rumors of Jesus. There's these different stories of Jesus. There's all the gospels of Jesus. There's so much stuff that is about Jesus. And it's the most popular religion in the whole world. We can't just it's fake. That's too easy. It's too easy of an explanation. It's oh, it's fake. It's almost like saying God's real. It's the same thing.
But who do you think? Let's take myself and trust but verify. Who do you think? Do you think any of us are just throwing it out there that it's fake and that's it?
I don't think it's fake. That's why I have this argument for it, because there's a reason that I believe it. And the reason is because it's huge.
But do you think that myself and trust are just throwing it out there when we're having these conversations, just saying, well, your religion is fake, and any explanation will do, just because it's fake, so it doesn't matter. Do you think we're having conversations like that?
There's no rational argument, dude. We've gone over this probably for 15, 20 years on the show. There's no rational explanation of God. The only thing you could have
that's not the question I'm asking you.
Like mushrooms or DNA.
That's not the question I'm asking you.
Sorry, what were you saying?
That's not the question I'm asking you. The question I'm asking you is, do you believe that myself and trust are going out there having these conversations and saying, well, your religion isn't true because it's fake, end of, that's it? Do you think that's all we're saying to these people?
Kind of.
Do you think that's our method?
I know what you guys do. Kind of. It's not exactly the method, but that's the idea, is that it's not true. You guys have no reason to believe any of this stuff, but you believe it anyway. That's where you guys point out the falsification.
I've never had a conversation like that in my life. I've never just said.
When I watch the show, you guys point things out about where people are wrong. It's because they don't have reason.
Correct.
Right. Because we're not just sitting here saying, and then that's the end of it, right? Like that, yeah. And see, that's what I was saying is I'm not totally dismissing your thought exercise. I'm not dismissing it at all. And to me, I'm not seeing the internal incoherence. I'm not seeing any type of incoherence in what you're saying. So I'm not dismissing it at all. But what I'm saying though is that I think it has I don't know if I'm ready to say, oh, well, it's a complete replacement explanation for what's in the Bible. You know what I mean? Yeah, I don't think I'm ready to go that far. I mean, what you're saying makes sense. I'm not, like I said, I'm not dismissing it, not discounting it. I do think though it has its way, of challenging other people's understanding of and their beliefs. And like I said, is to say, how do you know this didn't happen rather than what happened in the Bible? And then you could even come up with 3 or 4 other possibilities that make a lot of sense. And then just present them all as a multiple choice and just say, okay, believer, how do we dismiss all of these? And point to the Bible as the one true explanation.
Yeah, but the Bible doesn't make any sense. That's the
to you.
I agree.
To you.
To you, but I agree with you.
Yeah. It's impossible, man.
This is
I've tried.
This is the problem.
Let's think about what makes sense here.
Jahdel.
Let's look at why would these rumors happen? How are they spread? That's the questions I'm asking.
Am I muted? Jahdel. Am
I talking?
Please.
Who's talking here?
Jahdel, please.
Talking.
Right. Okay, so here's the problem with, I think, with the kind of method that you're kind of just throwing out there. by saying that, well, it's not true, it's nonsense. And I agree, I don't think the Bible is true. The problem is that there are people with entire worldviews based on the fact that it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there is a major problem with worldview conversations. I don't like having them at all. And, you know, I put this out in all the public speaking I do. Everywhere I go, I mention that I don't like having worldview conversations. There's a better way to have these conversations. The problem with what you're doing is you're just out and out dismissing somebody's worldview and saying, well, that's nonsense, so this is the most likely explanation. With someone who does believe in miracles, with someone who does believe in Immaculate Conception, all you're going to do is make them turn around and say, well, I don't agree with you. It's not going to be productive by saying, look, you believe in nonsense, this is a more likely explanation. If you're going to frame it in the way that Trust But Verify framed it, where you can actually walk them through and say, let's have this conversation, let's put forward this alternative to Jesus being born of Immaculate Conception. You know, Mary got pregnant by someone else. She was trying to cover it up. Let's have a look. How do you think that's likely? That's a good way to use this that you're proposing. It's a really good way to use it. And neither myself nor Trust But Verify are saying that what you're saying is a bad thing. What we're trying to point out to you is that just simply throwing it out there and saying, this is true, and what you believe is nonsense, is not a very good way of having the conversation. It's not going to convince somebody who believes in the supernatural any more than them turning around and just telling me that Jesus is my Lord and Savior and I should give myself to him. That's not going to convince me. This isn't going to convince them.
And how does the conversation go with someone who's Christian? It goes nowhere. They can't fathom.
That's not true.
That's not true.
That's not true.
I've never heard one person be like, oh yeah, God doesn't exist, who's a Christian. Like, just throwing it out there. Like, there's
here's one thing about that. Here's one thing about that. They have held on to this belief most likely for years, and they have layered reasons on top of why they believe. And so what it takes, at least from my experience, is to dig through those layers and get to the core reason why they believe it. And so I think what it's going to do in this instance is then if you lay it out as, how do you know this alternative explanation didn't happen, that they were just trying to cover up this, you know, out of wedlock pregnancy, then they're going to point to other reasons why their belief is true. Well, because the Bible says so. And then you can then say, well, how do we know that's true? Well, because, and then they're going to give you all those reasons that they give, right? The 500 witnesses, the manuscripts, the Dead Seas, all the explanations, all the reasons they give. And then you can start dismantling it one at a time. And what I like to do is I like to get to those moments of cognitive dissonance. And I think you might have seen that before, when you get to a moment where you ask that critical question or bring up a critical point, and then they just pause like deer in headlights. That's the moment of cognitive dissonance. And you just let that sink in. And of course, they're gonna find their way out of it 9 times out of 10 and then give you another explanation. But that actually starts planting seeds of doubt. And that's, at least from my perspective, that's what you can do. Because if you're trying to dismantle their entire belief system in one day, it's not going to happen. Or in one conversation, it's not going to happen. It's usually going to happen over the course of many, many, many conversations. I've had people who've come into my lives who have said to me, I have listened to you for months and I have been so angry with you. And then they come in and they say, but I started thinking about things. And then now I'm here to say that, yeah, I'm now an agnostic and I'm really questioning what if this belief is true. But that was after months of listening to me. Months of me asking questions, talking to people day after day after day. And so I think that's what it takes.
Yeah. I have literally had people send me emails saying, I used to be a believer. I no longer believe because I've listened to you. I've had conversations with you. I've listened to the shows and the other hosts on the shows. I now no longer believe. It is possible, but I think you need to lower your expectations that it's going to happen in a single conversation. And I don't think there is a single gotcha argument you can throw out there. There's certainly things you can throw out there, as Trust has just said, that make them stop like a deer in the headlights. And possibly this you're suggesting is one of those things. And they will go away. You can always see it. We've all had these conversations. You see it. It's that exact point where they just leave the conversation. No matter what platform you're on, it's where they leave the conversation. And you know you've got them. You know you've got them thinking. And that's so important. It doesn't matter that in that instant, they're not turning around and saying, I renounce my faith. I'm no longer a Christian. That doesn't matter. The fact is that they're thinking about it. And that is the important part.
I don't care about that. What I care about is getting something that's truer than the Bible out there. And if my explanation is more sound and more reasonable,
and this is the thing. This is the thing. Jahdel. This is the thing. What you are proposing is not truer than the Bible because it is speculation. It is fan fiction, and it has its utility in a specific context. But there is no evidence to back what you're suggesting up. And to suggest that it is truer than the Bible is, I'm sorry to say, absolute nonsense. And this is my sticking point with your approach. It's not truer than the Bible. There's nothing to support it. Now, if we have a look on what is more probable, we can say it is more probable than the narrative that an angel came down and impregnated a woman and she had a miraculous conception and a baby. It is far, far more probable. It is far more likely. In fact, I would suggest the alternative is impossible, but that doesn't make it in and of itself true. And that is the point that we're trying to, I think both of us here are trying to get across to you.
Can I speak, please, for a second? I didn't say it was more. I'm not saying it's more true. I'm saying it's more likely. It has more reasonable explanation. The explanation.
You literally said it was true, sir.
Okay, I'm not going to
truer.
You literally said it was truer than the Bible.
It's more likely, man. I said likely. I just used that.
No,
word.
You didn't. You go back and listen to the call. You literally said it was truer.
I know what I said. I'm saying now. What I'm doing now is this.
Jahdel. I'm going to end the call here because you're just insisting you've said something that you definitively did not say. So go and listen to the call. Give us a call back next week or when you can call back. And, once you've realized what you actually said, let's talk through the utility of this and whether it's a good way to proceed in these arguments. I'm going to let you go. Thank you for your call. I can see, Chloe, you are in the call queue. We will get to you in just a moment. Trust but verify. What do you think of that?
Honestly, I like the explanation. I mean, I honestly liked it. But like you said, we can't verify this. So it just points to falsifiability. And I think the problem with that is that Jahdel was sounding more and more like an ideologue than he was, a rational person. And so when we get to that point and just say, no, my belief is true because it makes sense, that's just an assertion. That's just a claim. Yeah. And so we have to go back and say, okay, well, how do you demonstrate that? And there was no way. And he conceded early, I can't demonstrate it. But see, neither can the Bible. Well, just because we can't demonstrate they can't demonstrate their belief, that doesn't mean that we just, come up with our own explanation and then just say, well, it's true. It's truer than yours. And, like I said, if you just put it out as a possibility and then just do a what if, it's a hypothetical. And then you say, now, how do you demonstrate yours over mine? I think that's a great way to go. That's a perfect way to go. And I think, Jahdel, you'll make a lot more inroads that way than just slamming somebody over the head with this saying, it's true, it's true, it's true, because that's actually what Christians do. I mean, a lot of Christians do. And I think that's one of the things, at least I do, I fight against is, you can't slam me over the head and say this is true. You have to demonstrate it.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% with you there. I think I agree with you. I think it was a great call. I think
it was a good call. Yeah.
And it's a great idea. It's a great idea for utility. It's just this idea that it is true. And I implore him to go back and listen to that call.
Yeah.
And because that is actually what he said. Okay, so we are going to give a couple of super chats. One from last week from Anne Christie, the Donut Fiend, for $5. Who says, thanks for having me on the show, guys. You're the best. Yeah, great show last week. If you haven't listened to that, go and listen to that show. And again, from this week, Anne Christie, the Donut Fiend, sends another $5 saying big hello to Richard and crew and big welcome to Trust But Verify with a big old smiley face.
Thank
you very much for your support. Yeah, absolutely. And another great way to support us is by sending super chats. So get them on, get them in. We will read them out just as we have done there. You can join our weekly watch parties at the Free Thought Library on Sundays for live viewings of Talk Heathen and the Atheist Experience. That happens every single Sunday. Doors open at noon, and it is a great place for building community. Many of the hosts go down there. A lot of the crew go down there, and there really, really is a big family feeling amongst the atheist community of Austin. If you are in the Austin area, you can follow us on the Meetup to keep up with community events, and you can see what's going on at tiny.cc/ACA Meetup. There's lots of different things like philosophy under the stars, game nights, and more. And you can follow Talk Heathen on TikTok, Talk Heathen, and join us for our pre-show lives at the ACA TikTok. And we have another call in the queue. I'm going to take Chloe, who wants to argue that while religion, the Bible itself may not be true, it still contains truths. Chloe, hit us with what you're thinking.
Yeah. So earlier this weekend, I was doing ritual with my organization, with my pagan organization, and someone mentioned that mythology is the most important thing that never happened.
Okay.
And I was wondering, what is the atheist perspective on believing something for its truths, for its subjective, human, touchy-feely truths, over taking it literally and taking it all at face value?
It's a good question. I think we should start off by saying there is no atheist perspective on it as a unified thing, because we all have different ideas. We're all from different backgrounds. I've never been a religious person. I've not come out of religion, so I don't have that connection with having had that belief in these things. So everybody has a different take on this, and I'm going to let Trust But Verify give you his.
Thanks, Richard. And, I don't know if you remember, Chloe, but we've actually talked before. And and it was actually a really good conversation. Yeah, so it's good to hear from you again. And I think if I hear what you're saying, you're asking, mythology, there's some element of truth in these mythologies. And so why can't that be good enough? Would that be a kind of a fair way to put it?
Pretty much. The religion doesn't need to literally be true for the values to matter, for the stories to matter, etc.
Yeah, like the values in terms of its utility, right? Like if it provides, maybe, for example, comfort, or like peace of mind, maybe something like that.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say community, things like that.
Okay, community. And, I don't hate that at all. I don't dislike that, even for a second. I think that's okay. I think that if you're, because I've talked to people who believe in the Greek gods, right? And the difference, though, is that, yes, like you, they have their beliefs, and in some ways it can help them. Maybe from a personal side, it makes them a little more grounded, a little more stable, like what you're bringing into the community aspect of it. I think those are fine. I don't want to get to a point where we are just completely dismissing beliefs that we don't agree with. There's a big difference. I don't want to do that. I think people are entitled to believe whatever they want. The problem, though, is if we're using these beliefs to legislate other people's behavior, if we're saying my belief is the only belief that anybody should believe, and we know that a lot of other religions promote that. And so that I don't agree with. I don't think it's a good idea to say, because of, for example, because of my belief, now I'm going to vote so that people don't have rights. I'm going to oppress people. I'm going to consider people less than. That's where the problem is. Does that make sense?
It's on the oppressive factors, not on the liberatory factors of these faiths.
Right. There's a line. Yeah.
Because if I said I'm going to stand 10 toes down on reciprocity, which Norse pagan, I'm Norse pagan, so that's something that matters to me. If I stand 10 toes down and say, because of rules of reciprocity and hospitality, we should expand and we should reform, let's say, immigration, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we should welcome the other, and we should build whatever up with people willing to join us, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I stood 10 toes down on that, that's not the oppressive factor. That is not crossing that line.
I agree. Now, if you said, and now you need to become Norse pagan because we're standing 10 toes down on this, and this issue of reciprocity, and that only Norse paganism can offer this, then that would be crossing a line to me. Do you agree or disagree?
Oh, absolutely. 100%. I don't think anyone should be Norse pagan. It's a weird religion. But it's the one that seems to work for me. So I
you know what, Clory? I have talked to 2 other Norse pagans since you and I talked, and it's actually and they all said the same thing. They said it's a weird religion, and so you know what? I got to be honest. It was actually fun to listen to the lore. I'm not going to lie. I actually enjoyed listening to the lore, and so I actually get along pretty famously with Norse pagans.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, so I got no problem with it.
Sitting around the fire, listening to the drumming, that's just a lot of fun.
Sounds fun.
Chloe, I'm going to disagree slightly with Trust But Verify, I think, here.
Oh.
And I want to ask why. Why believe something for the utility of it only? If you're making that stance, to me, there's something there that's saying you're not accepting it as true already. If you're not accepting it as true, then surely that utility can be found in other places. And
it can. I'm sorry.
No, please go on, jump in.
I can. It's like iron supplementation. I can find that in a supplement, but I would rather just go eat a steak.
Right.
Because it doesn't just contain utilitarian utility. It also contains, human, soft, emotional resonance with, it's the reason why you would eat a steak over getting an iron supplementation. To have the human experience of participating in this thing that we've done for thousands of years.
So again, my question comes down to why? Why? Because you can get that human connection from other sources without the extra baggage. So why would you choose to do that? Because in this instance, this isn't and I'm sure, I don't know if you agree with me here, feel free to disagree. If it's not a question of conviction, if it is a question of choice, that taking this belief as utility or taking this idea as utility rather than belief, why not just go to another source that doesn't have the baggage there as well?
You're not going to like my answer. I'm going to quote the Matrix and say, because I choose it. And I don't understand why. And I really don't. I really don't understand why I chose and made this decision. And, you know, going from mystics to atheists to debate bros, trying to find the answer to why am I like this? Why did I choose this? It's the big question that I don't think anyone actually has an answer to. Why their particular religion? Why does it speak to them on a level that overrides good sense?
But these people believe this to be true. This is the distinction I'm trying to make. When you talk about people who believe, why do people believe in a religion? And yes, they are, there are lots of emotional reasons why people believe religions, but they believe them to be true. Most people who believe in Christianity, who believe in Islam, who believe in Buddhism, they don't go there and say, I love chant, I love this chanting, I love this prayer every Sunday. You know, this is why I believe Christ is the Messiah. They enjoy that aspect of it alongside believing Christ is the Messiah. But what you seem to be saying is you understand that Christ is not the Messiah, but you're taking this handle, this label of Christian because you enjoy the aspect of praying. Now, I know you're not a Christian. I'm just using that as an example. And this seems to be the difference between what you're saying and what other people who believe in a religion, who genuinely, wholeheartedly accept this religion as true, seems to be. So is there any aspect of this in which you consider that the supernatural elements, the elements of this are true? Or is it purely, I enjoy doing this, therefore I'm going to continue doing it?
Well, the thing is that the second does lead back to the first, because once you've had experience, in ritual, once you've had experience in those things, it does start to cloud and start color your what you actually believe. But the fundamental reality, though, that science is real, the Earth is 4.7 billion years old. Take your medicines, take your vitamins, take your vaccines. Leaving that sense, I don't think is incompatible with holding on to those truths that we can only get through spiritual means.
So you do believe
that
it's
we
true?
Get,
is this what you're telling me? You do believe it's true?
I don't believe whether or not it is true is important.
That wasn't the question I asked you. I asked you if you believed it was true. Whether you think that is important or not is not the question I'm asking you. I'm asking you if you do believe in these supernatural elements, for want of a better word, of this religion that you're following.
No.
So what was the last couple of minutes of conversation for then?
Because
if you don't believe that they're true, what was the whole thing about? Well, these, this utility part of it, it does lead you just into this deeper meaning and, strengthen your faith in it being true. If you don't believe it's true, why did we even have that part of the conversation?
Because you're giving me an absolute yes or no here, not...
No, I'm not.
There might be something going...
No, I'm not.
Because
I'm trying to distinguish between conviction in something and something purely as utility. I'm not saying there has to be an absolute yes or no. I'm trying to mark that distinction for you, because it seems to be, when I'm having this conversation with you, on one hand, you seem to be telling me it's purely a utility thing and I don't accept any of the supernatural things. And then on the other hand, you're saying, but accepting the utility leads one to believe that the supernatural part of it is true. So I'm trying to distinguish whether it is a conviction in you that it is true, and this is why the utility of it is so important, or whether it is simply utility sans any of the supernatural, sans any of the conviction.
Let me ask a question. If I say that yes, to be 100%, consistent, that because what I'm trying to get to is a soft form of supernaturalism, like something happens somewhere and we have these experiences. That is happening. Why? And it just can't be the result of brain matter doing brain things. There's a human story going on.
Well, we'd have to look.
Supernatural.
Chloe, we'd have to look at those particular instances. We'd have to look at those particular instances. And here, I think, is kind of this. This is why I think it was so important. And I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm bearing down on you, but I wanted to cut through that vagueness. Because now again, after telling me it's purely utilitarian, after telling me that, you're now saying, well, actually, it might be a reflection of a deeper supernatural truth that might be there. And this is what I'm trying to cut through, to get through, because these are two different conversations we're having. One is a conversation about the utility of believing in something that you know is not true. And the other one is a conversation about the conviction of something that is true, that could possibly be true or might be true, and how we investigate that and justify that belief. And these are two separate conversations. They're both very important conversations. None of them are good or bad. There's no good or bad position in them. I'm not breaking down on you because I'm trying to say Chloe is wrong, Chloe is bad. That's not what I'm doing. I'm trying to pinpoint that these are two very different conversations. Although on the surface, they might seem very, very interconnected, the two different conversations to be had. One is about the psychology of utility, and one is about the epistemology of belief and the justification for that. And this is why I'm trying to cut through in such a sharp way, because I want you to understand that it's not just I don't really believe it, but it could lead to supernatural belief, because that's smoky nothingness. That doesn't explain anything on either side of the argument.
Yeah.
So please.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to just add one. Oh, no, it's okay, Richard. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just wanted to add this little bit that I think the psychology of belief, that's a great point you bring up, Richard, because there is utility and evidence about, like, say, having belief in yourself, that you can accomplish things or something, that kind of lines up a little bit with the psychology of belief, right? If your confidence is really low, you don't think you're going to, let's say if you're taking a test in school and you don't think you're going to pass, there is a higher chance that you won't do as well as you think you will because your confidence just isn't quite there, right? So in a lot of ways, yeah, the psychology of belief is a thing. And I think, Richard's point, if I'm picking up what you're putting down, is then there is also value in the epistemology of things, like, what's the theory of knowledge? How do we know these things are true? And I think what happens is that people blend and blurry the psychology of belief with the epistemology, and then they start thinking, well, because the psychology of belief is here, this makes it true. And I think, Richard, if I'm understanding you, you're trying to kind of separate those things.
Absolutely,
and say, yeah, not an issue with the psychology of belief, but let's now talk about how do you know this is true? Because I think that's kind of the things that you're kind of you're bringing into the conversation, Chloe, and so that's where we're at now.
Right, and maybe it was my misapprehension, because like the questions of epistemology are only a problem if you're a literalist, and so few of us are literalists that, it just didn't occur to me that, the literalism problem of belief, like, I believe that the stories about my gods are the stories that they tell about themselves. Whether or not they are true, it is true that these are the stories they tell about themselves. Whether or not they are true is another story, because my gods lie. My gods, spin tall tales all the time. It was just part of the cultural norm. What even is?
I think I have a heart of the matter question. Yeah.
Yeah.
What's more important to you, the truth of the stories, or the impact that they have on you?
The impact that they have on you, the human impact.
Makes sense.
So, yeah, I hadn't considered that part, because I am just so not used to being in that kind of mindset of, oh, this is literally true. This must have happened. The world is made out of a Jotun skull. That just never crosses my mind. And then I want to apologize for not being ready for that conversation.
I want to just clarify as well that I'm not specifically saying that this is literally true. This is literally true. I'm just trying to dig down into whether you have a supernatural belief, because you did say in this conversation that this utility aspect of it leads one to accept the supernatural aspect of it. And that is where I need that separation comes in. It's really, really important. And let me give you an example outside of your area, just to kind of show you how, because I think you'd probably agree with me if I move the conversation away from you and let's talk about someone else. If we have a Christian who believes that they have been given evidence that God exists because they went to hospital and their cancer was cured, and for them, that is evidence that God exists. Now, for me, I would make the same separation there. I would say this evidence is evidence that informs their belief. They have been cured by cancer. That informs their belief that God exists. It is not evidence that the belief itself is true. And that's a really, really important distinction. And I don't think you would disagree with me when I phrase it like that about Christianity. But that seems to me to be exactly what you're saying about your own religious faith, your own religious conviction, that this utility aspect of it, this belief aspect of it, which you are using as utility, also goes on to inform the supernatural aspect, that there is something supernatural out there, and this is informed by this utilitarian aspect of it. Now, I'm not saying that a specific story in your religion is either hard and fast true or hard and fast false. That's not where I'm going with it. What I'm just trying to put out there is it's really important to separate this utility aspect from this other aspect of it being true, actually true. Are you following what I'm saying? Does that make more sense to you?
Yes, yeah. And I'm not disagreeing that that's not a problem.
Right.
It can lead people into some pretty weird places and possibly dark places, depending on how their experiences go.
Okay, so in respect of that, sorry, Chloe, please finish and then I'll come back to it.
Oh, I was just going to say, what I was going to get at is that once you've had certain experiences, those experiences inform a gnosis that's hard to describe in words and hard to communicate.
Yeah, what are considered, it was Stace who said that they gave six aspects of this, I can't remember exactly what they called it, but it was basically the supernatural experience. and describe the 6 qualities of it, and they're very hard to put into words. That's why he came up with these ideas. That's
Pretty
true.
much.
That, you know, and we find that all across. You know, I did a talk just, I think it was last week, and I visited a city near to me, and I gave a talk about philosophy and the universe and all sorts of different things. And one of the things I said in that talk, relating to the universe, which is something we know exists, is that it is impossible. It is impossible to really grasp what we're talking about when we're talking about the universe, unless we use metaphors or these different ideas, because it is reality itself. It is a vast, vast thing, and we need to go beyond words. We cannot describe in words what it actually is, what it truly is. We need this ineffable kind of aspect of it, and there's nothing wrong with that. I defy you to find me a cosmologist anywhere that doesn't look up at the universe, despite understanding it, despite understanding the science behind it, and not looking at it and still feeling this vast inner awe when they're looking at the universe. That goes for all human beings across all different kinds of societies, regardless of what the belief systems are. That's perfectly natural. The sticking point is, are those supernatural aspects true or not? And that's really, really important, especially when we're trying to dress this up as this is okay to have these beliefs because they contain utility. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. Things feel good. That's fine. Things can be helpful when they feel good. That's also fine. But when that starts leaning into, I'm not even going to say when you start saying this is absolutely true, but when that starts leaning into, therefore, there may be a supernatural aspect to this which is true, then that's where it stops being fine. That's where we need to start saying, do I care about whether what I believe is true or not? Because that's a really, really important point. It's a really important point for personal integrity. It's a really important point for communicating those ideas. And it's that gray area. It's that gray area in this that, and you've called the Chloe, you're a friend of the show, Chloe. We love you here. Nobody's saying this of you, but there are lots of people who hold similar ideas to you who do use it, not for personal utility, it makes me feel good, but who use it to try and con other people, and they use that vague area. And if you're not clear in exactly what it is that you mean, you're in some ways propping up those people adjacent to you who are using it for nefarious purposes. And that's really, really important. This is, there's a reason why magicians who pretend to have psychic abilities say, I am a magician and I am pretending to have psychic abilities. And they don't go around and say, maybe this is actually true after all. Maybe my magic powers are real magic powers. That's firmly left in the hands of the con men. And when we grey these areas, even if we're being totally honest and, pushing forward our own integrity within our own belief system, you might be propping someone else up. And that's why it's so important. This is why it's so important to be so, so clear on this. Chloe, please
Absolutely,
respond.
100%. Yeah, no. That was a lot to take in, and I had to just clear myself because that's 100% correct. There are a lot of people out there who, whether they are themselves true believers or not, will do harm. But unfortunately, I think that is just a risk we have to take as human beings, that the thing that we do might harm another person, and it's not great. But on the other hand, we can't step through life worried that we're going to step on toes. We're just going to be on tenterhooks all the time. So like I'm okay with propping up someone who might be using this for evil. Incidentally, if I counterbalance that by saying, hey, no, we need to listen to the skeptics here. But, you know, my contention will still be that these experiences happen and they mean something, which I don't know what they are. I don't. I have no idea how to judge human experience, you know, that kind of human experience. You know, like, yeah, it might be interplay of, you know, neurochemicals and signal processing and this and that. But how it feels is another story. And that's, you know, harder to cope with. Those feelings that you get from the inside. Like, those are just weird and awkward and messy
and perfectly normal human feelings. Look, I'm going to say one thing and then one more thing, and then I'm going to let Trust jump in because I have talked an awful lot during this call, and I want to listen to him because he's brilliant. That's why he's on the show. So, but just before I shut up, yeah, it is perfectly normal. Those feelings are perfectly normal, and there's ways we can like look at that and understand that and verify those feelings as normal. You know, I'm just about to start a master's in psychology. I've got a good friend who's literally wrote the book on emotion. You know, who's another host of the ACA, Dr. Richard Firth, God be here, who was on the non-profit show and has been on this show a couple of times as well. Emotions are important. Nobody's trying to dismiss emotions as important. They are really, really important. The way we assess information is really, really important. And I don't want you to, for one thing, to think I'm coming as, I'm not one of these hard and fast skeptics, kind of like the first caller who we had on, who was saying, it's this or this. That's not the way the world works in reality. And I believe it or not, I spend probably 75 to 25% of my arguments on the internet arguing against atheists and not against religious people, because, you know, atheism doesn't equal skepticism, unfortunately. People still make mistakes. So I just want to, you know, my last words to you, Chloe, is that I'm not attacking you. And I've been really hard on you on this call. I just want you to understand I'm not attacking you. Trust but verify, please.
Yeah, I think the last thing I'll say is I agree with you, Richard. You know, emotions and feelings are super, super important. And, you know, that's what, you know, ultimately, I think emotions is one of the main drivers of forwarding our species. You know, that's one of the main drivers. So, yeah, it's super important. And, you know, I for one, Chloe, I would not dismiss like your method of going about flourishing, because I think that's what this is about. This is flourishing for you, and you're not harming anybody. I mean, this is the second conversation I've had. I actually think what you're doing is pretty wonderful. So you're not harming anybody. You know, the folks in your drum circle in your community, they don't sound like they're harming anybody. And so, yeah, I mean, keep doing it and do it proudly. Stand on 10 toes, stick your chest out and do what you're doing. Absolutely. Because again, you're not harming anybody. And I think though that the skeptics, and I'm happy to hear that you're saying, hey, you know, don't forget the skeptics here, because I think it is a pretty good backstop counter to, hey, we don't want to push this onto people and then say it's the only way, because see, that puts you in danger, right? If we have these ideologues out there, they're saying my way is the only way from both sides, it puts you in danger and it infringes upon your ability to flourish. And I don't want that.
Definitely. Thank you for and I just want to say, Richard, I would prefer honesty and that kind of that kind of pressure rather than being puffed up or whatever. But trust, that is everything that I think I needed to hear. That I'm more or less on the right path on this, that I'm thinking along the right lines, that I'm not going off on I'm not going off the rails. That I'm at least on the right path, even if I have to adjust and make sure that I'm making better claims and making sure that I'm more clear.
Yeah, Chloe, you've been a regular caller to this show, and I don't think anyone would accuse you of not adjusting and reassessing your position after these conversations, and I think we all applaud you for that. I'm going to let you go. Thank you for your call, as always, and please do continue to call in. I'm sure some of the other hosts would love to talk to you as well.
Good to hear from you, Chloe.
Yeah, Chloe is a regular caller and always enjoy listening to her calls. Right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to announce the top 5 patrons, and then I'm going to bring Jamie in for a bit of conversation as well, because we had some interesting conversation before the show that I think might interest the viewers as well. So the top 5 patrons are, all singularity, Dinglebury Jackson, Kaleve Helavete, and I don't even know how to say this. This has thrown me off. Just the period character. However you say it. We would say full stop in Britain, period. However you say it, that's it. Just the character. And Casey Kickendall, number 5. And of course, an honourable mention goes to Icon or Classed. Thank you to everyone who gives to us on the Patreon. And if you want to have your name read on air, then please consider supporting us at tiny.cc/Patreon TH. If you are quick, we still have time for another call. And if you disagree with any of the previous callers or the hosts, please do give us a call. But in the meantime, I'm going to pop Jamie up because we were having a couple of conversations before the show about different methods of kind of not tricking people as much, but kind of catching them out in when they're so convinced of something and putting things, and we've done it a couple of times during tonight's show as well, putting things in an alternative way, in a framework that may not be directly applicable to them, and them agreeing with it and then realizing, well, actually, yeah, that is similar to what I believe. So, Jamie, welcome to the show. First of all, give us your opinions, if you have any, on the calls we have taken.
For hours, because they're quite fascinating. My question to Jahid, oh God, I've got his name now. I took notes. First caller, I wanted to know, Jahdel, sorry. I would love to know what his objective was with that call. Because was it to just get a validation that, oh, that's an interesting theory or that's an interesting hypothesis? Because, yeah, it's nice to make up stories. But was it, if it was to try and convince us that this is a valid rhetorical technique to try and counter apologetics, I would push back on that in the strongest possible terms. I try not to use the flawed rhetoric of my interlocutors to push back on them. I find that not very productive. Like I say, it's not that while that story may be more probable than the actual story is presented in the Bible, fine. And that's, again, a talking point you can have. Saying that it's truer, and he did say it was truer, hopefully he goes back and checks the tape, is not a great way to go about that. And a couple of other things that troubled me about that exchange. One was the sort of like indignant standpoint of when we're saying, well, we want evidence. I'm a skeptic. Like I want I'm not going to declare something as possible or even probable or even possible without appropriate amounts of evidence. And secondly, even taking into account things like Occam's razor, there was some weird, like misogynistic and anti, like homeless or like anti-poor person rhetoric in that story, like venom against those particular parties, and even using Occam's razor, like don't stack assumptions, minimum number of assumptions. One of the things he may not know that I learned through host and friend of the show, Justin Deconstruction Zone, is that in ancient Judea, between the actual wedding and the full consummation, there was a year, and they didn't have any sexual intercourse during that year, the husband and the wife. It was the time for the groom to prepare the home and that kind of thing. They didn't even live together. So what's more likely, that the dirty woman went out and was unfaithful to her husband, or a man who has been given this woman and lives in a society where men's autonomy and thoughts and will is more important than women's, just can't wait that year and decides to go and have a bit of the old okey pokey. And that breaks protocol. Can't have that. And so they come up with a story. Again, that's no truer than his, because I have no evidence for that. Other than, citing archaeological thoughts and like scholarship on wedding practices of the time. But at least mine doesn't paint the lady as the cheater, and is again more likely, because it's far more likely for a man to break protocol to get his end away than for a woman to cheat in those days, especially considering the consequences, as he said. As for Chloe, the original question about even if it's not true, can we find truths in the Bible? We can find truths in any text, be it fiction, non-fiction, etc. Right? You can glean something. That's what literary analysis is all about. However, I would always want to try and take a text in its full context and for its entirety. Bit of a Godwin example here, but yes, I'm sure there's plenty of very strong lessons to be learned about leadership and unity in Mein Kampf, but I'm not going to cite that book as a source for those lessons, because, oh boy, does it come with baggage, as does the Bible. Right? I'm more apt to find lessons in places like The Lord of the Rings or the Dresden Files, or like autobiographies of people I admire, right? Because I can stand by that text and say the whole thing like jives with me. I can take it rather than going, yeah, I know that the Bible's like, pro-slavery and pro-rape and pro-misogyny and pro-genocide and all these bad things, but there's this one thing in there that really spoke to me. I'm like, cool. And if someone presented me the instruction book for something and a third of it was wrong, a third of it is nonsense, like a third of it is lies, a third of it's nonsense, and a third of it might be true in some contexts, but a bunch of it is like abhorrent. I'm like, that's a terrible manual. I'm going to throw away that manual and look up a YouTube tutorial instead. And the last thing I'd say is that you covered this. There's no minimum safe dosage of irrationality. The steak analogy was quite good. Yep, if religion is steak, I think we should actually more be seeking out the healthy spinach of secularity. But I mean, it's nice to have a steak every so often now. It's comforting and nice despite the cholesterol. I mean, I'm definitely a irrationality enjoyer when it comes to my food choices. So yeah, but I would say that as long as Chloe is self-aware about the potential dangers of being cover for bad actors. And I don't think there's that many real bad actors in Norse paganism these days. But to take it back to the Bible, there's plenty of people who would jump on me saying, yeah, I do believe that some of the teachings of Jesus have some truth in them. I told you that the Bible is true, and therefore we should ban butt stuff. And I'm like, okay, no, that's not what I meant. Anyway.
Yeah, appreciate that, Jamie. We do have another call coming in, so I'm going to boot Jamie out. There we go. And just before I take that call, there is another super chat I want to read from Crispin Slit, member for 2 months. Thank you for your membership, who sends £2, the correct currency, and just says thanks with 3 love rings. We appreciate that, and we appreciate you, Crispin. You're always there in the chat, keeping things moving. However, this is really important. Debbie is calling in, who wants to correct the hosts about the Immaculate Conception. We're always up for some correction. Debbie, welcome to the show, and please go ahead and correct us. What is it you take issue with?
Hi, I'm calling about a misuse of a term. The Immaculate Conception refers to Mary's conception. She was conceived without original sin, so that she could be the mother of Christ.
Right.
It has nothing to do with Jesus' conception.
Very much appreciate that. So come on then, talk us with it, because I got that wrong. I'm not a biblical scholar. I got that wrong. Give us some of the background of that, just so we can learn from you and the viewers can learn as well.
The only background I have is that 14 years of Catholic education. So that's what it is. That's what we were taught year after year after year. It has only to do with Mary's conception, which is why she was assumed into heaven and did not die.
Yeah, first of all, I apologize for your education. But no, I really, really appreciate that. So I'm not just going to take that correction and drop you. You're not getting away that easy. So regarding this idea then that there might be alternative explanations for the miraculous birth of Jesus, what is your view on this? What kind of route do you go down when thinking about this?
I just think that it's a story. It's kind of harkens back to some mythology. There were virgin mothers and virgin births and things like that in mythology also, so it may be a copy. Yeah,
I think that's kind of my term. From a scholarship perspective, we certainly have this idea that there were verbal stories that were going around that were then kind of written down in proto forms and then expanded on and copied and systemized in about 30 years after the earlier oral traditions came about. Is that about where you're at with that then, Debbie?
That is, sir, exactly.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you very much for your correction. I always appreciate a correction, just to show that we atheists are not just in a bubble where we think we are on top of the world and right all the time. I got that very, very wrong. So, Debbie, I am going to let you go, but thank you very much for taking the time to call in and correct us on that. Very, very important, I think, that. Jamie, do you want to pop up again and just give us a little hello-ha while you're here? We are coming towards the end of the show. I want to, again, just ask Jamie about this idea of, because we didn't get a chance to talk to him before that call came up, this idea that somehow we can use things to kind of, little tricks, if you like, just to kind of change the perspective when we're having these conversations to get someone we're talking to see it from a different perspective. How useful do you think that is, Jamie, when we're having these conversations?
Extremely. And if you can give someone, like for the sake of argument, the benefit of the doubt, or let them have let them play with all the toys, so to speak, as part of your argument, then all the better. My favorite, and I was saying this before the show, is the choose between two kind of thing, where I say to the person, whatever they believe, whatever they're saying is true. I say, okay, a person comes up to me and tells me it's true, that God's real or aliens are real, the earth is flat, right? And they're right. They really did speak to God. They really have had revelation from the Almighty. It's all real. It's been revealed to them. And then another person comes along and they say the same thing, but they're delusional, or they're lying, or they're just wrong. They've experienced something, but it wasn't divine intervention. How do I, as an external observer, determine which one's true? Assuming both of them believe that they're telling the truth, but one of them's wrong, how do I tell which one's right? And that means that I'm not attacking their ideas, because that often is translated as an attack on the person, because these things become so intertwined with their identity. If you say that I don't believe that God is real, what they're hearing is, I think you're stupid, right? Which is not what we're saying. But when I say, let's say that you're correct, and someone else comes along and tells me exactly the same thing, but they're wrong, they're deluded, they didn't get to speak to God, how do I tell? Or a Muslim comes along and a Christian comes along and they're giving me the exact same arguments for their respective gods, who do I believe? And that puts the onus on the method of externalizing their belief and imparting it into someone. I'm like, you are now the teacher and I am the student. Teach me how I would know. And if it's just personal revelation, I'm afraid that's just not good enough. How about yourselves?
Yeah, true.
Yeah, I call that the outsider test of faith. And I use that all the time with personal experience. And yeah, you're absolutely right. So I get a lot of people who want to do a testimony. Hey, I talked to Jesus, or, I was in the hospital and they prayed and they cured me. And then, I like to bring in Hinduism as like my favorite go-to, because it's so different from Christianity. And so I say, well, there's a guru in India that you can go on YouTube and find him who's healing people right on the spot. And he's walking on water and he's this. Does that make Hinduism true? And then it just immediate short circuit. Well, no. Okay, well, then how does it make your belief true then? A Hindu could come up to you and just say, well, all of these things happened to me. I prayed for miracles. I touched the blessed cow, and then my family suddenly, became millionaires. Well, does that make their belief true? And so it just, yeah, you're absolutely right. It just gets them to reconsider things and then put it in a different light. So yeah, totally agree with you. It's a great, effective way to spark that reflection.
Yeah, absolutely. I have had such fun on the show. It's been my first show of 2026. Our 10th anniversary, everybody. Really excited. And I've had the pleasure of having Trust But Verify on, who I've been wanting to have on the show for such a long time. Such a big fan. Trust, tell everybody where they can find you.
You can find me on YouTube and TikTok. And I'm under Trust But Verify 2024. And I'm actually live between 4 and 5 days a week. So good chance you'll catch me live and you can watch, or if you have questions for me or you want to mix it up, yeah, come on and request up and we'll talk about it.
Perfect. Look, for all the rest of you, if you don't believe, this is your community. And we appreciate you being here. And that word community is so, so important, as as Chloe showed with her call. Chloe has different beliefs to us. She phones regularly. We talk through these things. There's no animosity there. And I think I want to extend that to whether you're a Muslim or a Christian or a Hindu or a Buddhist, anyone. You can call the show and you're going to be treated like that. You're not going to be shouted at, because this is a community and you don't have to believe exactly the same as us to be part of that community. If you do believe, we don't hate you. We're just not convinced. See you all later.
We want the truth! So watch Truth Wanted Live, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect online at tiny.cc/call-TW.